Okay, it's Dr. Susie, and it's the very first time that I'm interviewing somebody that's been doing sacred spaces principles for several years now. And I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Kimberly Kuden, and she lives in California. And I've been to her house many times. It's beautiful. There's been some pictures on my Facebook group of her site, and we've had some magical times over there. So I'm going to interview her today and let her kind of tell her story about what her journey has been as she's pursued some of these sacred spaces principles and worked through them, and whether they're good things or bad things or challenges or triumphs and all of those things. And she's had so many wonderful experiences, and I just thought it would be great for people to hear, because sometimes it gets discouraging, especially if you're out there by yourself and you don't know, is it working? Is it not working? Should I keep with it? What is the outcome? So I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Kimberly and just have her introduce herself, and then tell a little bit about her story and her horse's stories.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Kuden, and I was first introduced to Dr. Faye through Warwick Schiller's podcast. I heard an interview. I first heard him interview her, and shortly after that interview, it really resonated with me. Dr. Faye's methodology and the interview really resonated with me. And so I was talking with my husband about it, and my husband really encouraged me to just reach out to Dr. Faye. And so I did. And I can't remember, do you remember how I reached out to you? Was it an email?
I think so.
Yeah, I think maybe you gave your email on the podcast or something. And so I sent you an email and you responded, and we started working together. I read your book and we started working together remotely. And at that time, I didn't even own a horse. I was caretaking for a horse, like a retired horse. And so I started working with her and Dr. Faye over the phone, over Zoom, I think, or FaceTime.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then set up your first visit coming out. And yeah, that was how we got connected in the beginning. Yeah. You want me to keep going?
Oh, well, yeah. I see. I'm just thinking, oh, you're doing a great job. And see, I'm the worst interview in the world, because I'm sitting here going, oh, this is great. She's just talking and I don't have to. Oh, wait, this is,
yeah, because when we talked about doing this interview, we were going to talk about my journey with my gelding, but really my relationship with Dr. Faye started well before that.
Yeah.
And I think that's made a big difference in how things have progressed. Yeah, because we've had some delays, some outside influences that have delayed the progress that I've had with Handsome. My gelding's name is Handsome.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think I want to touch on too, because so many people feel like they're alone and they don't know for sure. And they kind of think, well, once you read the book, then you've got it all and it should be smooth sailing. And you can speak to that.
Right. And it's interesting because the things I learned working with you and Kiana, that is the retired horse that I am babysitting for the rest of her life. So some of the stuff that I learned with you working with Kiana, I have since forgotten and then had to remember again. And I oftentimes, I have to remind myself. I think the biggest thing that I learned working with you was that if I am really in the moment and paying attention, I have the answer of what the next thing is. What is the next thing that we need to work on? That answer will come to me. And I often forget that even now, that when I don't know what to do, I can get really quiet and listen, and the answers do come, and they're always right.
Yeah.
But remembering that is really, really difficult. And the value of that lesson when it comes to other areas of your life is it does translate, but it's really, really difficult to remember that and to trust that.
Oh, exactly. And I spoke to someone today, and they were at the thing. It's like, well, we need a checklist almost to, oh, something goes wrong. What's the first thing we do? And it's, I don't have a very long checklist of things to do. It's like, first of all, check back in yourself, make sure you're breathing, and then, do a body scan, see where you're at, how you're feeling. And really, it's everything I do. I want to make it so that you feel like you've got the tools that you can use, and they're not so complicated that with 52 steps that you have to remember which one first. No, it doesn't really matter which direction you go, but something's going wrong. You said it perfectly. Pause, take a moment, resettle yourself, breathe, and then just ask the question, what should I do? And the answer usually will come. And if you've come to my clinics, you probably know I've got a few foundational exercises or things that I do, and you can always go back to those too. And maybe we can talk a little bit about some of those, because I think there was the latest clinic, and this is a little bit off track, but there was the latest clinic where I had gone in there, and one of my foundational things is the phone call. And when I said we were going to do the phone call again, and you're like, oh no, we're revisiting that again, right? So maybe you can follow up with, okay, I had no idea the phone call would lead to where it did. So,
well, I do think that, like, if I remember, and also I think what you've done is you've kind of changed the way, like, even with the phone call, you've changed the way you explain the phone call. And I was thinking, like, where's the starting point? Like, what is some of the things that we started with? Because we started with different exercises with Kiana than we did with Handsome. And I don't know if that's because you had more experience teaching and had maybe decided a different starting point, or if it was just appropriate to start different with Handsome. So I guess I'm going to ask you that question.
oh, okay. And this is a really good question too, because I never know for sure from one of my foundational things that I do, which one I'm going to do with which horse and which one is the priority. So sometimes I might go in and go, oh, this horse is so emotionally unbalanced or afraid that I've got to start with this exercise and teach the horse about safety and comfort and how to get settled down. Because if he's that frantic and that out of touch with his body or out of his body, there's no amount of physical stuff I could do or mental stuff I could do or energetic stuff that I could do that will reach through to him in that state. He's almost totally shut down. So that would be why I would choose different things that I would go to based on what the horse is telling me at what time. And so sometimes I may go that one, and then I may go another one. I would say most of the time I'd like to start with, can we clear their body of a lot of the trauma that's really loud and really speaking and shutting down their ability to hear us and to connect with us, because that's a priority. So I can't remember back. I think that Handsome was one that I felt like he had so much underlying stuff that we couldn't get through to him with some of the other things we were doing.
Yeah, so now that you bring it up that way, now that makes very much sense to me, because with Kiana, she's an older horse, she's retired. She was a highly competitive, a very successful, highly competitive jumping horse, and she had a lot of physical things that she was uncomfortable with, and she had been by herself. She was by herself in a pasture, and then I moved her to my pasture, and she was by herself at my pasture. So so there was a lot of physical problems that she had, which is amazing because she seems much healthier now, and she looks much healthier, and even her immune system, just her response to like insects and stuff is very different. But yeah, we started out with a lot of her physical stuff. Remember, she had that thing with the back left, yeah.
Right.
And where we started with Handsome was more about coming out, because he it's like he didn't even look around.
Right.
Remember that one time, I think at the first clinic, you were tapping on his forehead, because he was just like, he's just quiet and nothing, no personality. And he's this big, beautiful horse, and he's sweet enough. He wasn't mean, but he didn't like people because there was no interaction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is where it gets really confusing for people initially, and you have to go through a lot of the clinics or work with me for a while to realize that this is not a cookie cutter type of training or method, because we have to evaluate the horse, and we have to evaluate the person, and where are they at, and what can they do together, and where's their relationship at the moment, and what, the big picture thing, and then decide which one of these little elements or things that I do are going to be helpful for that particular situation. And that's not necessarily something I could teach somebody right from the very beginning, because it's a lot of feel, it's a lot of intuition, it's a lot of, when I say feel, what I'm feeling internally when I step in with that horse and what I'm sensing. And that takes time. Everybody can get there, but it's not necessarily something in a clinic setting, especially, it's like, I don't know what to do, and you're on stage and whatever, and I'm just going to wait there and go, okay, what am I feeling from this horse? What is his priority? And I'll often ask him internally in a question, what do you need to work on? And he will show me that thing that's his priority. And then I usually just go with that. But again, the more times that you watch the clinics or watch me work, you're going to see that it's very intuitive process, and there is no roadmap there. But you do have, hopefully I can give everybody certain little skill sets or things that they can try, like what you've been doing lately. And you can go, let me try that. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try this other thing. Oh, that one worked. And just so that you've got things that you can build on and that you have in your back pocket, and you can pull them out and go, I don't know if that's going to work or not. And half the time, I don't know if it's going to work or not. I'm just taking a wild ass guess, essentially. Based on my experience, I think this is what this horse may work with this horse. And a lot of times it does, sometimes it doesn't. And then I have to go, whoops, that's not going to work. I'm going to redo and go do something different. And that's where people are kind of get tripped up. They go, but you started to do that and then you changed. It's like, yes, because I realized that wasn't going to get the outcome that I was hoping, or it wasn't getting through the horse in the way I hoped. And so I'm going to go back and change that and do something a little different. So again, where I start with a horse is going to be a lot of navigating and a lot of intuition and a lot of feel about what do I think that horse needs.
Yeah.
So yeah, if that a roundabout way to answer it. So anyway.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to remember like the first session we had with Handsome. I think we didn't do a virtual session. I think we worked with him the first time in a clinic together, right?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And I remember after that clinic feeling like the number one thing I needed to work on with him was connection. And I I was really kind of having a bit of an internal temper tantrum about that, because I didn't want to take the time to do that.
Yeah.
But I tell you what was interesting is that I ended up like loving it, and it ended up helping me, because I'd go out like at lunchtime, because I worked from home a lot at the time, and I would just take a chair and go sit in the pasture for lunch, eat my lunch out there with them. And over time, he started coming and interacting with me more. And then, so then once that started happening, as I would approach the pasture, he would come and be like, okay, what are you doing? What's going on? I think at some point he decided I was more interesting than just eating grass, and then I started asking him if we could go on an adventure together. And that was, we had a remote session, and that's when you introduced to me the most interesting man in the world. And I started playing with the most interesting man in the world concept. And that resonated pretty well. That was about the first 3 months that I owned him. Yeah, because and that is when I was able to like go for an exploratory walk around, the pasture or whatever. We've got a, just for visual for people, we're really lucky. We have about access to about 20 or 30 acres of pasture. So there's hills, and there's like little ravines and trees, and you can go from one pasture to the next. So to go for a walk and have him willingly come with me was kind of a big deal, especially since he just was not engaging at all. Exactly. And that was, in the first 3 months.
Yeah.
And we had the clinic, and then we had, I think I started just sitting in the pasture with him even before we had the clinic, but we had the clinic, and then that was like in October, wasn't it?
Might have been, yeah.
Because that's when my husband got diagnosed with cancer. And so kind of for a while, then everything kind of stopped, because I didn't have the time. My husband and I physically left. So my daughter was feeding the horses, and we basically moved out of town. So there was like zero contact with him at all for 5 months.
Yeah.
And then when we came back, I feel like we had another clinic. I need to like look up the timelines. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was where he was finally, if you remember, like my recollection was the first clinic with him was the round pen was just a meltdown for him.
Oh, that was the second clinic.
Oh, was that the second
clinic was the meltdown? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we had a remote session before where the round pen was a meltdown.
Yeah.
And it got a little dicey. Like he was actually coming after me, and then you suggested that I go to the outside of the pen. Yeah. And so right. So we went from, no interaction, kind of, like just go away or whatever, just, and I'm not going to look you in the eye, to, oh, let's go for a walk together. Maybe you've got something for me. To then he started showing his anger and frustration. And then we started running into the problem with just leading. He wouldn't go anywhere. Yeah. And so it definitely, there were like glimpses of it getting better. And I thought, oh, yay, I'm really good. We're really good. And then, and then he found his voice. And that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
It was really frustrating. And yeah, because he started saying no. I guess that's right. You know, he found his voice, he started saying no, and he started showing me anger too.
Yeah.
And he's a really big horse.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, he's like 16'2" and not thin.
Beefy, beefy. He's beefy. Yeah.
Beefy, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I kind of wanted to talk with you because I think, you know, it all sounds so magical that we bring these horses out of being shut down and now it's all going to be wonderful. No, the journey past the shutdown is dicey, and it takes somebody with a lot of perseverance and faith that you can get through it, because there's some things that are going to show up that are really scary or really discouraging, or you think you're going on a path and everything's great, and then all of a sudden horse forgets how to get in the trailer, no longer can get in the trailer, and you think, okay, where did that come from? He always got in the trailer before. And all of these things are things that I see so commonly when the nervous system is going through a major change and when they're psychologically going through a big change. And everything has to start to, I mean, it gets into that chaos. So chaos there is, everything gets chaos, and then it realigns at a higher place. So I, because I've seen the process go through, I can sit back and go, oh, well, yes, that would be common that that's happening now, or that's happening now. And don't be discouraged because it's just a phase, you know, and just stay on your track and where you're going. But boy, I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, I don't know how much more I can do it, or can I do it? Do I have a skill set to get through this? And do I have the time or knowledge or ability to do this, you know, and help this horse through that phase? But I kind of want to, and I don't want to go too long on this, but maybe you can just give a highlight of what it looked like on the other side of.
Well, I think just to answer those questions, those doubtful questions that we have is, do I have the time and the skills and the know-how? I think that what I've learned from you is that yes, we all have that. What we struggle with is the patience.
Mm-hmm.
And the belief that we will get to the other side, because, you know, Handsome would show some aggressive behavior, but it was easy for me to stay safe by not pushing. When he showed that, he was talking to me, and he wasn't, and like when I was in the round pen with him and he was really upset, the only time he would come after me is if I tried to interrupt his thoughts. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. So then I went to the outside of the round pen and I was safe because there's a fence between us.
Right.
And when he would lean over to like go at me, I'm like, okay, I'm pushing him. I don't need to do that. He's not ready for that. So then the question is, what is he ready for me to, you know, and how can I, and this round pen at this moment is maybe too much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we need to work on something else that he can handle.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, if I want to run a marathon and I start out with a 5K and I end up, you know, with shin splints. Well, I wasn't ready for the 5K. I need to walk a mile.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's all I need to do is walk a mile first, right?
Yeah.
So the round pen was, you know, probably to, you know, a 5K.
Yeah.
And we first needed to walk the mile, you know, but we didn't know until we went there, until he started talking to us. And he hadn't told me that the round pen was a problem for him.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just any round pen, because it's like at the top of a hill overlooking. So, you know, maybe it feels a little bit vulnerable. And there's an electrical tower that, you know, you can hear the electricity, you know, so there's a lot of EMF, and animals, you know, are pretty sensitive to that. So it could be that, could be the vulnerability of the openness. But any way you go about it, that round pen was too much for him at that time.
Yeah. And I think what's really important for people to realize is, as they're going through all these neurological changes and psychological changes, and that if we go back to the old way and punish them for their behaviors and do all that, we're going to just take steps backwards. So it's when you were saying, okay, that it wasn't safe in the round pen with him. He needs to speak. He needs to have a voice. And I asked him for his voice, and I better be prepared for what his voice sounds like and put a barrier between the two of us so that he can speak it and I don't feel in danger, and I don't feel like I have to be in there protecting myself or trying to go after him to keep him off of me. That, you know, that's a really critical point of this process is, yeah, once you delve into that, okay, you're going to be safe, means you don't do dominance-based stuff anymore. You don't go, oh, put your feet over there. Oh, get out of my space. Oh, go do this. No, they're in a very vulnerable place during that change in themselves, and they can't be in two worlds. Like, but you said to speak, but then you told me I couldn't. And so that's going to create more conflict. So if you're not sure, stay with the one that you are comfortable. If you like dominance-based training, stay over there, but don't start mixing this other and telling your horse he's got a voice and then shutting it off, because that's going to end up being even worse in the long run.
Yeah. That's definitely true. It's if you're going to go down this path, it is a commitment.
Right.
Because once they start talking to you, it's really confusing to them if you then say no.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like what you're saying.
And it can look really scary and ugly. I had one recently at a clinic, and it scared a lot of people to watch it. And it's like, yeah, that's when the horse, when I said, you have a voice, and he's like, well, I'm going to tell you all the things I'm pissed off about, and you just happen to be in the way of that. You represent everything that is about what's wrong in my life as a horse, you know? And so why would I trust you? And they're trying to test me to see if I will go back and start wailing on him and, you know, doing the old stuff. And so this is, you know, if the horse is really checked out, this is a phase that you might have to go through, and it's dicey, and you need to be prepared, and you need to be figuring out how you can be safe in that space and allow the horse to do the work it does. And what is really hard is, and part of the training and what you've been doing too, is like, you've got to be able to be not triggered by anything the horse does. And you can't go, oh, I'm so discouraged. Oh, I'm so pissed. Why is he still there? I'm so frustrated. I'm so mad. You can't be any of that. You've got to be completely neutral to it and go, you can let it go. I hear you. I see you.
And when I am really struggling with that, and I've talked to you about, like, I'm really struggling with being okay with whatever, you know, how long this is taking, or, you know, my husband telling me we should be riding or whatever. Having that congruency, right? That I am not pretending like I'm okay with the animals, because they know, they pick up on that. And that if I'm frustrated, I can go out there and be like, I'm frustrated, like I'm frustrated, so that you know that I'm frustrated, and that it's not you.
Yeah.
That I'm frustrated at. It's whatever it is. And that I've also seen and felt makes a difference in it. And then it also helps, like, okay, it's like the cat's out of the bag, that, you know, the elephant in the room, like, okay, I'm frustrated. And the horse is like, okay, you're frustrated. Well, maybe it's time for me to step in and show you a little kindness. Or maybe the horse is frustrated and you're frustrated, and the horse is like, yeah, I don't want to. You know, maybe this isn't the day for us. Maybe we're just going to sit here together, you know? That sometimes that happens. Not that often, though. Most of the time, actually, I can't think of a time that I went in and I was frustrated and Handsome said, I don't want to play. It seems like he's come in and been like, I got you.
Mhm.
And then and that really helps to make it easier for me to come in and be less frustrated.
Right, right. So as we kind of wrap up, because again, I don't want to go too long, but just kind of maybe a teaser, because we may speak again on this. And we've mentioned a few terms like the most interesting man and the phone call and all of this. And some people are like, what are those things? And I think those are, we can explain those in another video. But why don't you speak about a couple of the really cool things that have happened recently so people don't go, oh God, we just got to go through all that. There's nothing at the end. But I think there were some really cool things that have happened recently or within the last few months that go, oh my gosh, I never could have dreamed this would happen. So maybe you can share.
Well, yeah. So I think the first thing that was like, that, I mean, we were both in tears. So I was having a virtual session with Dr. Faye, and I had my phone. I got up and I stood on the water trough, and Handsome, and I was talking to Dr. Faye, and we were kind of trying to figure out what we were going to do for that session. And I believe I said to you, I wonder if he'll come over and let me get on him. And he did. He came right up to the water trough and presented his back, and I got on his back, and we were talking about I don't even remember what we were talking about, right? But he whatever I don't even remember how this happened, but I remember like looking out across the field and being like what would it be like if we just went? And he did. And I had Dr. Faye in my hand on the phone. I'm bareback on his back, and I just wrapped my hand in his mane, and he went galloping across the field. And it was the most amazing feeling because it didn't feel out of control. It didn't feel like he was running away. It felt like we were playing, we were going together. And then at some point I realized that we were galloping across the field, and I thought to myself, I wonder how we're going to stop. And sure enough, he just trot, 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 walk, 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 dropped his head and started grazing again. And yeah, and it took my breath away. And I think Dr. Faye, I think you had tears in your eyes, and both of us did, and it was absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And then my next challenge was my fear that when I put a saddle on him that I wouldn't be able to do that. And I really got stuck there. But the next time I put a saddle on him, I went out for a trail ride out behind my house. We've got a neighbor that has 200 acres, and he just went, and he was forward and this is his first trail ride I've ever taken him on. And he just went with his ears forward and looking around and just trotting and not running, not like panic, just going. And it was beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it was good to kind of end on that, so people didn't go, oh, here was this angry horse that was trying to bite your head off, essentially, to saying, you want to come for a ride. And, even now I'm thinking about it because I was on that call, and I remember you had your phone, and I'm on the Zoom or the phone call, and all of a sudden it's like, I think I asked you, are we galloping? Yes, we're galloping. It's like, oh, wow, this is going well. So I was along for the ride, which thank you for letting me be in that really magical space, because it was so cool. And it's where I want to have people understand that you can get there. And this is all the hard work that you put in, is those moments like that. And it's not for me to have that moment, because I had my moments. It's now for me to share, I guess, with other people how I got to those moments myself, and for them to experience it brings me lots of joy. And what I want to do is like, this path can be hard, but it's rewarding. And at the end, the thing that you come away with is not just a relationship with your horse, but a relationship with yourself and a relationship with every other horse that you ever come across. Because everything that you do with Handsome is going to translate to how you interact with another horse. And they're going to be different from the start because of what work you've done. And so nothing, I just want to, this is one of those things, because there's not a lot of information out there on what's the end result of sacred spaces. What are you going to achieve? And it's not my thing is not about sitting out in a field meditating with a horse. I have never done that I did it with some people, but I've never done that as a practice in my life, because you don't have to. You can if you want to, but you don't have to, because all the things that matter to the horse you already have. You just have to bring them back up in yourself and find that space and find that quiet space and that place where you can go, I don't know the answer, and then trust that it'll come. So I think this was beautiful.
Can I share one other little story too?
Yes.
my farrier is a local, and his wife, and they own a saddle shop, or they used to own a saddle shop anyways. And so my husband decided that he wanted my farrier, his name is Bob, his wife, to make me some home handmade, custom made chaps. So the last time he came out to work on the horses, he brought his wife, and we got to the pasture, and the horses were way on the other. I actually couldn't see them. I didn't know where they were, but I suspected where they were because of there's only so many places that I can't really see. And so I was whistling and hollering, and I walked into the pasture with my halter on, with my halter in the hand, and I saw the horses on the other side, and and they looked up at me, and Handsome came galloping, down into the ravine and up the hill, and stopped right at me. And I wasn't surprised, because that's how we greet each other. And I put the halter on him and said that you're first, and then came out, and then the farrier started doing his work and went and got the next horse, right? And then onto the third horse, and his wife, the farrier's wife, said, I remember when you first got that horse and how difficult it was to shoe him, and I can't believe I've never seen that before. I've never seen that kind of coming to you and running to you, and no treats, and to sit and stand quietly for the farrier like that is amazing. And yeah, all of the horses. The new one is she's still learning, but I've only had her a couple of months, so yeah. So that's really good to hear that from a third party, and it kind of reminded me that that's really special.
Yeah,
not everyone has that.
I think so. And that's a beautiful story to end on, because we talked a little bit here in this session about all the ups and downs and the scary things and the uncertainties, and I don't know what to do, and it's not like they're going to go away here, because he's still got some things to work on and all that. But at least that there's things that you can do, and there's things that can happen that maybe you didn't think could happen before, or especially with him. And every time you have one of those, it builds your confidence and it builds your faith. And that, again, it's not something I can give people. It's like, I can just do words and concepts like, if you do this and this will happen. And they're like, yeah, sure. Right. Yeah. Okay. but I wanted to have you on because you can tell your story about your own experiences, and that you have found some things that have worked in finding a different relationship with your horse, and perhaps with people in your life, since you run a business, and I think you've applied many of these things in the business too. And maybe we can talk at another time about those applications. They don't just stick with the horses, they bleed off into your whole life, and make other people's lives better. Because
100%.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kimberly. This was lovely, and we shall speak again if you're up for it. And we'll go ahead. I'm going to just stop the recording here, and hopefully this will give people some hope too, you know, who are on the same struggle path that you've been on. But you know, for me, same thing. It was a long journey, but I would not trade one bit of time that I spent working on this stuff to go back to where I was.
Yeah, no
Never.
way.
Never.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Fourth of
Dr.
July.
Happy 4th of July. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.